And again, I'm not going to judge someone until I see their first season. I need to see how Nick is able to work with these young guys on the field, because I do think he's coming, and I think he checked a lot of those boxes that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman talked about during the hiring process.
Good day, everyone. It's Krause of JAKIB Media. Why am I wearing a Carson Wentz NFC East Pro Bowl jersey? Well, it's the only jersey I will not be able to give away this season, but we will be giving away 10 Devontae Smith jerseys at our 2021 NFL schedule release special broadcast, all presented by Pure Bull. The broadcast will be Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to midnight. You must be subscribed. You must be present to win, and we'll give away 10 Devontae Smith jerseys. Also, as we get closer to the season, tickets for every single game on the schedule, both home and away, plus our bus trip and experiences for fans that you will never find anywhere else. All part of the JAKIB Media Network. See you next time, everybody.
He is John McMullen. I am Jody McDonald. Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. We got an hour to continue to talk Philadelphia Eagle football here with you. Coming up about 20 minutes.
Kristen's here, Jody.
Oh, damn, what's she doing on so early?
Good morning.
Wait for her. Kristen, how are you this morning?
I am great, Jody, John. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It's so great to talk with everyone in Philadelphia yet again. I'm still ripping all of my Phillies, Sixers, Eagles gear here on the West Coast. So I think I'm getting a few confused looks at times, but
it's good to see you, Kristen. We're going to miss you at rookie camp this weekend. Kind of fill us in on what you're doing now.
Yes. So I essentially decided to make a pivot. I mean, every industry has changed so much during the pandemic. And I kind of thought to myself, what's going to be the next of what's coming in sports media and entertainment and the broadcasting industry? So I joined an amazing company called Tagboard, and essentially we do social media integration to help fans and viewers engage in both live sporting events and broadcasts as well. They've got an incredible client list. I'm still working with a lot of Philadelphia teams, so don't worry. I am on the West Coast for now, but I am definitely still keeping Philly very close to me.
And you're going to get a couple strange looks wearing Eagle Green or Philly red pinstripes out there. But, hey, appreciate your continuing to rep out there on the West Coast. How's the weather out there? I got to think that was a pleasant surprise. We haven't had a spring day yet here in the Delaware Valley. Must be nice out there weather-wise.
It has been gorgeous so far. I'm just watching the sunrise come up right now. So it's beautiful. But I do love still getting up early, because I feel like it's that fear of missing out, that FOMO. And I feel like I have FOMO not covering all of Philadelphia sports anymore. So I feel like I've been getting up really early anyways, just to go through my Twitter list to see, what John's tweeting out, the rest of the Eagles beat writers, just making sure I'm on top of things.
Well, we're thrilled you got up early, because West Coast guests, morning show, it's not the easiest thing in the world. Yeah. But Eagles rookie camp is coming up. Now, I want to take back, when you got here at Box 29, it was 2017, wasn't it?
It was, yes. My first year was the Super Bowl run, and what a year that was. I feel so blessed that was able to be my introduction into Philly sports, if you will.
Yeah, it's amazing, because they hadn't won since 1960. So I don't know if you looked at yourself as a good luck charm. But then you had to live through the downfall. How much did that surprise you? We were just talking about it, because Doug was back at Mike Quick's celebrity golf tournament. And I know you're a big golfer as well, but he was back in town. And I say to myself, how did this guy not get some dispensation from the Philadelphia Eagles?
I mean, it's one of those things where I look back, I loved interviewing Doug. I love talking with Doug, and I truly will stand by this. I don't think that Doug Pederson lost this Eagles locker room. I do think there was a rift with some of the players if you would go into the locker room, and it felt like you were getting camps kind of divided between some of the veteran players and some of the younger players. And I've said this before, but I do think that the Eagles, the best thing that they had going for them, especially in 2017, was the culture of this team. Once you took that culture away, because everything was virtual last year, you know, guys aren't able to spend the same time in the locker room. I remember talking with Brandon Graham last year, and he said, you know, no one's eating in the cafeteria anymore. So it's not like you have these veteran guys, your Lane Johnsons, your Brendan Brooks. Well, he wasn't there obviously, but you know, Fletch, whatnot, talking and communicating and building those relationships with those younger players. And so I feel like there was this little bit of a rift between kind of the new school and the old school way of how things were done. And obviously, as Howie Roseman made the point, things needed to change. And Jeffrey Lurie said the same thing. Things needed to change. They needed to kind of break down from what they had from 2017. They knew they couldn't run it back anymore. But it was really interesting to me to see, you know, the kind of the front office really go all in on some of these younger players and the mentality that I think they had, taking a step back from that Eagles culture that I think we all came to love and respect.
And Kristen, while you're right, it just wasn't the same in the pandemic year for the Eagles. The reason why I can't lean on that too heavily, though, is it was the same for everybody else. Everyone was playing under pandemic rules and not being able to spend as much time together and eating in cafeterias and the like. So while it probably hurt the Eagles, it could have, maybe even should have hurt other teams just as much. So you need to find another explanation for it. You just don't go from 3 straight playoff years to 4-11-1. What did you think was the biggest reason why the Eagles walked off the cliff last year?
I mean, no, that's a great point, Jody. I think especially too, you know, we went into the 2020 season saying, hey, the Eagles are the only team with a veteran head coach in the NFC East. Yep. And not just that, but he's also won a Super Bowl a few years ago. So I do think that was an advantage that I think was lost for the Eagles. And you know, I don't know if it comes down to communication, because I think communication for every team was tested throughout the pandemic. But I do remember talking with Doug Pederson in a Zoom call one time when Carson Wentz was still starting. And I asked him, I said, Doug, like, how do you communicate with Wentz? Because it was clear that there were some disconnects happening right now. And Doug said, you know, I try to take the same verbiage that Carson's telling me that he's finding wrong in his game and use those same words back to try to create some sort of change and resolve. Clearly, we never saw that change or resolve. So I'm curious if you also saw some communication issues kind of break down throughout the team. It felt like the team was being stretched in so many different directions and that there wasn't kind of that unified vision. I mean, you can say you want to win the NFC East every year. You can say you want to make the playoffs, but it just felt like the team was going in too many different directions and never really had that kind of unified voice or goal that I feel like we had seen from them in past years. They just felt very disjointed last year.
Is that sort of a shelf life thing in your experience, Kristen? Do you believe in the so-called shelf life? Everyone says in sports, everybody's got a shelf life. You can be a great coach in this town. We all know Andy Reid was a great coach, but I don't think anyone disagreed with the fact his time here, it probably ended.
Yeah.
Did Doug's time just end?
I do think it did. I mean, I go back to that just very bizarre Jeffrey Lurie press conference after Doug was let go. And, you know, Jeffrey said, you know, he deserves, I expect him to have a job in the NFL in the future, and I expect him to do great things. I think we all expect that as well. I mean, Philadelphia has seen coaches, players, what have you, go on and have just fabulous success outside of the city, which is a little frustrating in some senses. But I do think that Doug is going to be one of those guys. It's just a matter of what role he steps in to fill. Because, again, I do think that as we saw kind of that degradation from the 2017 season to where the Eagles were last year, so many of the key pieces has kind of fallen out from underneath them. It's not like Doug had that same kind of, not chain of command, but just how he disseminated information and culture throughout the team as well. So I think at that point, the foundation was gone. And there was, I talk a lot about the culture of the team. I mean, I say that because we saw how bad the play was on the field. Like, I'm trying to come up with a reason for why we saw that bad play on the field, because it was horrible. But I do think that it was just Doug's time from both an on-field and off-field sense of things.
Kristen,
but I do think he's going to have great success somewhere else.
Kristen, as you can well understand, we've talked a lot the last week about Aaron Rodgers and the messiness that is his relationship with the Green Bay Packers these days. We certainly talked about that leading up to the trade of Carson Wentz, on how at the end of the season it got bad with Jalen Hurts taking over, Carson not handling it well, basically talking his way out of town. We're still waiting on the divorce between Zach Ertz and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, you covered Zach for your years here in Philadelphia. Key element of this team, major part of that Super Bowl championship, but this last year, not good. Difference in agreement on what kind of extension his contract should have been. They still haven't come to any kind of, they haven't come to any conclusion to trade him. It's just sitting in abeyance. I guess we're a slave to the calendar that after June 1st, things get easier. But in your mind, is there any going back between Zach Ertz and the Eagles?
I don't think there is at this point. I mean, he's a guy that has done so much for this team. But again, if you're going with the idea that the team is, forget the phrase that Howie Roseman has said, retooling, not rebuilding. And I think that when you're looking at that, this team is continuing to go young. They're continuing to look for players that are going to fit the future run that they want to go on. I think Zach is immensely talented. I think he is a great locker room guy. I do think that he's going to need another landing spot to maybe re-jolt him as well and be re-energized. Because, I mean, as much as he loves Philadelphia, I remember sitting on that Zoom call with him and he was so emotional about this city. And I mean, what does that say about your players when they're just so emotionally connected to the city as well? I think it's a beautiful thing to see, but I also think it is time for him to find another landing spot, to join a team where I feel like he's going to be able to kind of mentally reset as well. And to join a program maybe that is going to highlight and feature him more than I think the Eagles would currently do right now. I think we've heard some really good things from the Eagles when it comes to Dallas Goedert and what they think they can do and or what he can do. And so I do think that it's time for Zach to move on. But when you talk about Aaron Rodgers and Carson Wentz, how interesting that when you had two starting quarterbacks who had their teams draft younger quarterbacks in last year's draft, and you saw Aaron Rodgers respond perfectly to that kind of motivation. And then obviously what we saw unfold with Carson Wentz was just the exact opposite. So interesting. I'd love to know, years from now, talking with those two, again, they're maybe candid, although maybe we'll never get that from Carson, reasoning for how they were able to self-motivate in that 2020 season after having their teams draft younger quarterbacks as potentially they're, the guys that were going to come up underneath them.
Yeah, you mentioned Aaron handled it perfectly on the field, Kristen, but off it,
it's a mess.
The same as Carson. Yeah. He was not happy. But you mentioned emotion with Zach Ertz. So when I hear the word emotion, I think Nick Sirianni. Your first impressions on the new Eagles head coach?
You know what? I go back to one part of his press conference. And again, I'm not going to judge someone until I see their first season. I need to see how Nick is able to work with these young guys on the field, because I do think he's coming, and I think he checked a lot of those boxes that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman talked about during the hiring process. But I go back to Nick Sirianni saying that he had not seen film of Jalen Hurts for these guys before coming to the team. And I was like, what? There's no way that your new head coach has not seen tape of some of these guys. So I think from the media side of things, I'm really interested to see how close he keeps some things to the vest. And I think in Philadelphia media, you need a coach that's maybe a little bit more transparent in some of that, because of course your head coach has seen film of Jalen Hurts at this point of the season. Of course he went through and watched how things unfolded. So I'm really interested to see how Nick is able to, again, work and build up these younger players, because I think, especially when you get to the draft, the Eagles did everything possible to surround Jalen Hurts with players that are going to allow Jalen to succeed. I think that offensively they are building around him. I think that's a great thing. And I think we knew that was coming after some of the talk and the rumors from Jeffrey Lurie as well in terms of quarterback competition. But I'm not going to judge Nick Sirianni until I start seeing some more things come out of training camp and I start to see some actual production on the field. Because at this point, I still don't know who this guy is truly.
Kristen, we will see a change in the National Football League this year from last year, and that is the return of the fans. Yes, some teams had partially filled stadiums, Eagles included in that mix, but just nowhere near full-throated sellout crowds like you can get all across the country. But at Lincoln Financial Field, a pretty big part of the Eagles' success over the last 3, 4, 5 years, the Doug Pederson era. Will that translate immediately into the Nick Sirianni era? We are coming off a 4-11 season. How much does getting fans back in the stands specifically help the Eagles in 2021?
Well, let me say this. I mean, the Eagles have the best home field advantage when it comes to their fans of any other. And I'm not pandering to Philadelphia. It's true. I mean, it is. I will never forget the NFC Championship game against the Vikings, being down on the field and hearing Meek Mill's Dreams and Nightmares just blast my ears off and just see the crowd and the players on the field. That is one of my all-time favorite moments covering sports because it was truly just a special moment between the fans and the players on the field. That said, I'm very interested to see how some of these younger guys respond to Philadelphia fans, because as we all know, it's not an Eagles game if we don't hear a few boos in the crowd as well. Even when they were doing pumped in crowd noise, I feel like there was a few times we would hear boos when the Eagles went 3-0. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me, but I'm interested to see, how some of these guys are going to respond when they are facing a little bit more adversity, because I think a lot of people in Philadelphia are so high on Jalen Hurts right now, and rightfully so. I think he gave us a good look at maybe what he can do. I'd like to see a full season from him, and especially with some of these new weapons that are coming around him. So I'm interested to see if they face some adversity and they do hear some boos, how this kind of young guard, these younger guys are going to react, and maybe Nick Sirianni as well, because I think Doug, having played in Philly, fully understood what he was walking into as the head coach and how fans were going to react. Nick, I'm not so sure yet, but I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah, Kristen, you mentioned that NFC Championship game. I think that was the first time, and I've been covering this league for a long time, I saw a team's heart be pulled out when Patrick Robinson had the pick six, Chris Long with the almost sack of Case Keenum. You could hear that noise in South Jersey across the river. It was amazing, Jody. And literally, I think people forget the Vikings were playing well. The Vikings were ahead 7-0, and they had the football and were driving a little bit. And the fan base just completely turned that game around. But I do want to shift gears to the quarterback for a couple reasons. One, you mentioned Nick Sirianni did not watch tape of Jalen Hurts. We know he was saying you have. So to me, and I also want your thoughts on is it Keaton Slovis? You're
Yes.
a Southern Cal person. So I want your scouting report on the 2022 draft, because it seems to me the Eagles are giving Jalen Hurts 1 year with the eye on getting a quarterback next year.
I would agree with you. I still think maybe it's Howie more than anything. And, I say Howie whenever I just think about the front office, but I do think Howie is running things right now. I do think that I think Howie wants to so be right about the Jalen Hurts story after everything we saw happen with Carson Wentz. And I think that's an easy thing to say, but I do think, when we go to this draft, that the Eagles did a great job of building pieces around him. I mean, you look up Devonta Smith, you look at, some of the younger pieces that they already have in place. And I think Hurts is setting himself up for success. I also think if you go to social media, he's been out working with some of these young receivers as well. So he is checking all of the right boxes for fans to say, look, he's taking time. He's working with young guys. Remember, that's what we used to see Carson Wentz do that in the offseason, whether it was, I know a lot of the guys spent time in Texas the last few years, but after his rookie year, all the guys went to North Dakota, and it seems like things were really able to click with that off-season training, just kind of one-on-one. So I think Jalen's checking all the right boxes. I do think the Eagles, as the quarterback factory, are always going to keep an eye to the future, an eye to what's happening next. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're continuing to look for to look for the what's next, especially when you look at where this team is positioned right now in the NFC East. I think that you're seeing the Cowboys put together a good offseason. I think you're seeing, the Giants. I think you're seeing Washington continue to position themselves in maybe a stronger way than the Eagles right now, just because the Eagles are coming off of that abysmal 2020 season. So it's really interesting to see in that kind of NFC arms race. And I can't believe I just said that, because the NFC was just an utter hot piece of garbage last year. But, what team is going to emerge from that pile? So I do think the Eagles are always going to have an eye to the quarterback, but I don't know. I think there's a little bit longer of a leash on Jalen Hurts right now, but maybe that's just me coming from the outside perspective. I think Howie genuinely wants to see him succeed so that Howie looks a little smarter in that situation.
The NFC East rivalries are still in place. The level of the quality to be determined this year after last year. But you mentioned the quarterback factory. Every once in a while, you got to ship something out of the factory rather than keep it in-house. And that's what the Eagles did with Carson Wentz. Reunited with Frank Reich. Colts, a pretty good football team these last few years, but not truly a Super Bowl contender. Frank is talking up his new QB pretty good. How's it going to go for Carson in Indianapolis?
I mean, I think from the fans, I think from the setting, and I think from a guy that he truly trusts, I think everything is lining up for Carson Wentz right now. Now, I don't know how much success that is going to, how much success we're truly going to see from the Colts and Carson, but I think from him, maybe work-wise and life-wise, I think things are looking very, very good. Now we're seeing the Colts make a few moves. They did just bring in that left tackle to give Carson some actual blindside protection. So I'm interested to see how things look with that Carson Wentz Frank Reich connection once again. But again, I don't know how much success we're going to see from that. I just know that Carson is going to be probably a little bit more comfortable. But I think even in a new situation, we can't argue with the fact that we saw a broken Carson Wentz last year. We saw him try to do way too much early on. And just, I think after the second half of their opener, we saw really kind of degrading of Carson Wentz. We saw him that was the moment, I feel like, that we saw Carson try to do too much. We saw the picks come. We saw the poor decision-making. And I don't know how much we're going to actually see that change in Indianapolis if he gets into some tough situations, but we'll see. I do think that for him, though, he has to be personally a little bit more happier. And I do think that if someone can fix Carson Wentz, I do think that Frank Reich is going to be that guy to do it.
Kristen, I want to thank you again for getting up early this morning with Jody and I. Last one for me, and I'm taking the Super Bowl off the table because that's too easy. But yeah, I want your favorite sports moment you got to cover while you were here besides the Super Bowl.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I would have to say it's not Eagles. I mean, I already told you about the NFC Championship moment pregame because that was just unreal. But probably the Bryce Harper signing with the Phillies. I mean, I was blessed enough to cover Villanova win the national championship again in 2018 as well, and 2 parades down Broad Street that year. But the Bryce Harper news was just incredible because it felt like, that scene in Anchorman Panda Watch, like it was Bryce Harper watch. Like we were on it for so long. And I remember I was sitting in our sports office at Fox 29 and I got a text come through, and then about 30 seconds later, the news broke that Bryce Harper was signing with the Phillies, and I was told, go to the airport. I had a go bag that had been sitting at the station for about 2 weeks, and I was told, go to the airport. We'll find you a plane by the time that you get there. Hopped on a plane and covered the Bryce Harper signing and whatnot. And I remember I was able to get the first local TV interview down there in Clearwater with Bryce, and it was just a madhouse, and it was incredible to see this unfold. And it's been a lot of fun, even just trying to stream the Phillies out here too. I think the NFC East, I think the NL East was a division that I was really high on. And I think we haven't seen it quite live up to expectations just yet, but it has been a lot of fun to see again, how this team is continuing to grow under Joe Girardi, because I'm a big fan of his as well. But I would have to say the Bryce Harper signing.
Very cool story. But just in general, and last one for me, before you got here to Philadelphia, you knew we were going to ask you about football because John did the beat thing with you, and we are Birds 365. But what is your favorite sport? Is it football? Is it baseball? You talk glowingly about Bryce there. I know you were a former hoop girl up there in Portland too. What is your favorite sport to cover?
So, well, covering it had to be the Eagles. There's no question. I mean, and especially how high the city of Philadelphia is on the Eagles, how ride or die they are on the Eagles, I should say. But, I do miss the days pre-pandemic, being in the locker room, with the guys every day. And, one of my favorite stories that I love to tell is, Jason Kelce, his fun fact in his Eagles media guide used to be that he would listen to Christmas music before every single game, because he said it was the happiest music that he could think of. And I remember, I think it was, early December of 2018, and was talking with Jason and kind of brought up the fun fact. And I feel like every single day for a week that week, he would come to me with a new Christmas song. So I asked him what his all-time favorite Christmas song was, and he would kind of like find me in the locker room. He's like, no, it's this one. It's this one. So, there's moments like that where how can you not love that Eagles team, because they genuinely had so many good guys on that team and personalities, and really just getting a chance to know them on the human level as well. So that was absolutely amazing. Love covering football. I will say baseball was my first love. Growing up in San Francisco, the Giants are truly something special. So listening to the radio every day, and especially in summertime, that was what made me fall in love with sports. But covering the NFL and covering the Philadelphia Eagles, highlight of my career.
Kristen, great stuff. May the career only get bigger in your new venue and venture out there on the West Coast. We miss you here in Philly. Thanks so much for getting up early with us today.
Of course. Thank you guys so much.
We will be reaching out again for Kristen Rodgers. She's very good, and gave John McMullen a run for his money in breaking those Eagle stories when she was on the Eagle beat. And yes, I could see why the players would rather talk to her than you, Johnny Mac. But just the same, we had a great time talking with Kristen Rodgers. All right, coming back, we still got plenty of time to chat you up about the Birds. Big week, schedule release, rookie mini camp. We'll talk about both coming back here on Birds 360.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.